There is variation between different SPVs that councils have set up, by and large, in terms of what they're trying to get. So Newham, for example, as is their wont, are building lots of homes for private rent. Enfield are buying lots of homes for private rent and using them for temporary accommodation. Ealing, I know, is doing the same thing, but actually buying them outside of borough along the kind of route of Crossrail heading out of that borough, so that they feel they're well connected. So there are different ways of kind of what you want to get out of it, and what we want to get out of it is, one, the ability to build a different, sort of wider range of tenures to meet the breadth of housing need in the borough, but also it's so, as Neil said, by directly delivering, we capture that 15 to 20%, what would have gone in profit margin, that we can reinvest back and prioritise the building of social housing. Sorry, there was one question I had to Councillor Simp. I thought he said something about DCF, and I wasn't sure what DCF was. Thank you very much. Well, there we go. I wouldn't know what it is anyway. The judicial review is not on this decision or any of the information within it. It was on the March Cabinet decision to rule out refurbishment as unaffordable. So it's a separate decision. I think that may have been it.
8% of leaseholders.
Yes, thank you. So that's based, part one, on previous experience of estate regeneration, and it's to be prudent. The more people that move away, the more it costs the council, because you have to write a cheque if people leave rather than transferring their equity into a new property on the estate. So it's partly being prudent, not modelling 100%, because it allows extra headroom, but also it's based on some of the information provided in the test opinion, where 75% of people said they wanted to stay on the estate. So it's a combination of prudence and the evidence we've been provided with.
There was also a point around the language used to describe the viability study and the financial feasibility and all the rest of it. I mean, I don't expect to answer right now, but there seems like a good point that there does need to be more clarity around the communications on that.
Yes, although feasibility statement post probably won't be used, so I think there's a very fair point that Claire has made around clarity.
Councillor Dyer, any points on this?
I just wanted to add clarity again about what the proportions are of housing that's coming as a result of the special vehicle, and what's the actual council's bottom line regarding how many new council homes they want to build on this scheme, and if that's not achieved, would it go along with the scheme, proceed with the scheme if it wasn't able to achieve that bottom line of providing new council homes via the special vehicle?
I will proceed along the line if we can remember that point. Councillor Hazelden.
Only to reiterate the request for a long, hard look at how we communicate, how we phrase the complex issues in much more manageable, approachable, and therefore effective and trust-building ways. Can you have an assurance, please?
Councillor Powell. Councillor Nathanson.
Thanks. I had a question again around the SPV. You described it as a mechanism to access other sources of money. So presumably, as this SPV, the council is going to be able to access money it didn't have access to as the council. Is that correct? So my question is, how much more money are you going to be able to access? And also, you talk about this 15 to 20% that you're going to get back because you're not using private developers. So if you've worked out actually how much more money that you will get through this SPV, and whether you've actually looked into whether this money could be used to look again at refurbishing.
Can you ask that last point first, so I don't have to write it down and remember it?
No refurbishment has to come through the HRA of existing council stock, and the HRA, there's a borrowing cap set by government in relation to, and we're up against that cap. We borrowed right up to the cap to fund the LHS programme, and then we knew beyond that there was another 56 million that we need to find in order to fund the full LHS. So we borrowed up to that limit. In terms of access to money and how much, I mean, it's all to do with the scale of building that then goes ahead. So if we were to build one house, we'd only need to access a certain amount of money. And I don't need to be trite in my answer, but it will depend on the scale of development, and the programme is for 1,000 extra council homes that will require a certain number of additional homes, like intermediate or private rent on top of that, as at Summer Leighton Road, to make everything stack up. And the 15 to 20% is just because we're not having to pay it out to someone else, so the money is there to be included within the project costs for us. And I hope that answers that question. Councillor Hazelden on comms, absolutely, I give that assurance. I think that's been borne out this evening in the discussions around language. And Councillor Dyer on the number of homes, kind of going back to Councillor Simpson's point around the figures we've used to assess what could be built, and the figure is kind of thrown back that only 23 social rented family-sized homes would come out of this, but that's based on borrowing at 5.57 when we borrow at closer to 3% at the moment. So we've purposefully made these figures very conservative so that there is room to improve, and the flexes are all in there. So we're very, very confident about a bare minimum of 23. We committed in the Cabinet paper that would have to rise. That was one of the recommendations that we added in during the Cabinet meeting. And when you kind of look in the, whatever we're calling it, financial feasibility, stage post, gateway, there are the various flexes within there which show a certain increase of extra homes would give us a certain number of extra council homes, a certain change in the finance would give us a certain number beyond the 23. So we're sort of being able to demonstrate those at the moment. And the next stage, if the committee allows us to go forward, will be to work up those detailed plans so that we can demonstrate the number we would expect to get, which will be above 23. And I would hope significantly above 23.
So if it was less than 23, then what would happen? Bottom line.
It won't be below 23.
If it was less.
Well, it won't be. I mean, we could. It's pretty hypothetical. We know 23 would be the absolute bare minimum.
I've tried to let Councillor Bingham go first, but he's determined to go last, so Councillor Bingham counts.
Just saving the best, of course. Thank you, Chair, for your indulgence. Has there been any comparative analysis of how long and how effective regeneration would be compared to refurbishment, and whether the costs of refurbishing again in, say, 10, 20 years would be sooner if you did refurbishment than if you did a full-scale regeneration? I'm conscious of other cases, even though you might have the detailed plans yet for either scenario. Other cases where the council has refurbished estates and then had to come back to them in 5-10 years' time because they're not adequate to meeting NHS standards.
Saving the very complicated questions till 9 o'clock at night. How long and effective? We would expect, I mean, for example, Summer Leighton Road is being built with the idea that it lasts for 250 years and built to very high modern standards with higher levels of energy efficiency, with fully glazed windows, etc., 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 where you would expect those buildings to have a longer life style than a lot of, I don't necessarily want to talk about pressing here, but you look across the council stock and there were an awful lot of estates built in the 60s and 70s which were not built particularly well, they were not designed particularly well, and I can point to some houses in my own, which were basically prefabs which were only built to last 20 to 30 years, system built blocks, whereas we would be building for a much longer lifespan and you would expect to incorporate that, but I can't give you the figure off the top of my head.
Okay, I'm rapidly running out of time. Okay, right. Does any member of the public who hasn't spoken before? I'm come back to you. I'm just checking. Just checking. Calm down. Who hasn't spoken before about the heritage value? This lady hasn't spoken before. Do come up to the front. Okay. Can you tell us your name?
Yes, my name's Dan Phillips. I'm not a resident on the estate, but my house shares a boundary along the entire length of Cressingham Gardens. So my question isn't so much to do with the heritage of the estate, it's more to do with the estate itself and the financial viability, which is my house and at least 25 other houses bound onto the estate and make up part of the estate's look and how it fits in with the landscape. And I want to know how you're not only going to protect the estate, but if you are going to demolish it and rebuild it, how that is going to impact on the heritage of the whole area, including the park. And going back to financial viability, if any of those 25 properties are going to have a CPA placed on them, if you've included the cost of CPAs on those 25 properties in your budget.
Thank you. Anybody else? This gentleman.
Okay, thank you. Matthew very helpfully pointed out that we should follow what experts are saying, and English Heritage, while they didn't recommend a listing, they clearly recommended that Cressingham Gardens be made a conservation area as an extension of the Brockwell Park conservation area, and this has been clearly and repeatedly omitted. I think it comes across as quite deceitful to miss out that particular point. Sorry. The Save Britain's Heritage have written a letter to LibPEC saying they want to fund a full public inquiry into this because they have conviction and they have the resources that they believe that this estate is unique, particularly its vista. Have a picnic in Brockwell Park and tell me it doesn't feel like sitting in a sort of Edwardian village on the outskirts of it or something, which is what I think the Brockwell Park Society went and said. You've also had the 20th Century Society, which supported residents to apply for listed status, and they strongly, strongly recommend, and are still continuing to support residents, that this be made a conservation area and this estate is not demolished. So, and one last point, the Lambeth is undertaking, I believe, a historical assessment across the whole of Lambeth of its sort of assets. This is due to complete in the autumn, so I really think that ought to be heard out before the demolishment decision is made that will destroy that skyline.
Thanks very much. Okay.
Sorry, just very quickly, I just value perhaps a little bit input from sort of some of the democracy officers here. This doesn't risk prejudicing any planning decision at all, does it? 'Cause I'm just conscious that this is normally the remit of planning.
I can't answer that. But
I'm not either, so I'm not an officer to tell me that's fine.
I think it's fine because you're not making any decisions.
That's great. Okay.
But it would be useful to know that, given we don't have the expertise of the planning committee, that these things are subsequently considered by the planning committee as part of that process.
sorry, the planning and heritage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can pick up on those.
Okay, fine. Does anyone else, member of the committee, have a particular point or question to make about the heritage aspect? Councillor Parr.
Yeah, just to pick up on the review of heritage across the borough. I wanted to ask you what account you'll be taking of that in the decision-making process.
Councillor Bennett, if you can respond to those points as concisely as possible.
Yes, indeed. So it's quite right to say English Heritage did assess the estate and concluded that they weren't going to go ahead with listing. The issue around the conservation area was assessed by planning through the council's heritage officer, who looked at it and concluded it wasn't going to go ahead. That he's also the person who's responsible for commissioning that historical assessment work, so we expect to fit within line. And just finally to point out that recommendation 8 that we added to the report at Cabinet was in response to issues that were brought by the Brixton Society and Brockwell Park around the heritage and sort of planning constraints that would be raised by the park to make sure that they formed part of any future planning proposals that might be developed by master planners, so that they are formally recorded.
Councillor Wilcox.
If a conservation or design officer reviewed Cressingham Gardens in the light of recommendations by English Heritage to not list it, but perhaps it ought to be considered for conservation area, are there any publicly available documents that report on that assessment, that review?
I think there have been FOIs and that correspondence was published between people seeking it as part of the conservation area in response from planning, but where that is, but I believe it's publicly available.
Jay Parks.
I actually corresponded with Doug Black, and he sent me what was a breakdown of his working day. And he basically said, he's the conservation officer, he basically said he didn't have time to look at the conservation area suggestion by English Heritage. So I don't think that's correct, actually.
Right.